Hello, today I am giving my thoughts on the new Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, Partypooper. This is the 20th book in the series. I remember when Hard Luck was the newest book in the series, but I think I remember farther back to when other books were the newest. I remember Hard Luck came out when I was in 4th grade. The Third Wheel came out when I was in 3rd grade. I maybe remember Cabin Fever being the newest. That would have been around the time I started reading them. And I do have a memory of being in a Barnes & Noble and seeing a cardboard cutout standee thing of Greg. He might have been holding a balloon. Or maybe an ice cream. I think it was a balloon in the kids section, and I think it was advertising Dog Days when that was the newest book, but that was before I started reading the books. I think that was before I was at that level, but I think that's the earliest Wimpy Kid related memory I have. Anyway, I've read all these books and all the books in the series. I have not been reading them consistently since I was in elementary school, but in the past few years I've gotten caught up on them. So now, whenever a new book comes out, I get it and read it, and since last year I've been reviewing the new books. So today I'm going to talk about Partypooper, and for this review I'm basically going to go over the contents of the whole book. So basically there will be spoilers regarding what happens at the end, and I will be talking about specific plot points and things, so if you don't want spoilers, I wouldn't say don't watch this, I would say don't watch this until you read it, if you plan on reading it. But yeah, there's your warning. I will be going over things in it because I have some things to say. And usually in my reviews I don't get into spoilers, but for this one I will, especially because it's a really popular book. So as mentioned, I still read Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I find the books nostalgic and fun, and they're easy to read. They're light. Sometimes I like to read easier books just in between reading more serious adult things. And so they're a nice fun experience. I like the movies as well, especially the original 3. I know a lot of people hated the long haul movie, and I honestly didn't hate it. I thought it was okay. It's certainly not as good as the originals, but I didn't hate it. I believe I saw the first animated movie, but I've not watched the others since then. I don't know if I would bother, but if you've seen those, you can let me know your thoughts on them, but I'm sure they're not as good as the original live-action movies. I also still think that the books are funny sometimes. So this book, Partypooper, is about Greg's birthday coming up. Now, it doesn't say how old he's turning. He's just been stuck in middle school this whole time. For those who don't know, the series is episodic. It doesn't actually progress much. Greg has been stuck in middle school since 2007, I guess, when the books started coming out. So it's that kind of series, and people have definitely commented on that. And some people think that Greg should either get older or the series should just end. I personally don't mind right now that it's still going. I'm not at the point where I feel like every book is horrible and it should just stop. Maybe it'll reach that point eventually, but right now I'm okay with it, so you can let me know your thoughts on that as well. Anyway, Greg's looking forward to his birthday, and at the beginning of the book, like in many of these books, he starts out by just writing and drawing about his thoughts on things. In this case, there's quite the theme of birthdays and how birthday wishes work and what to ask for your birthday and how those things can change as you get older. And then more of the plot happens later. But yeah, at the beginning, it is just a lot of his thoughts. And I wanted to say how much of this book is actually things happening versus just Greg writing his thoughts about things. I think things definitely happen, but there are a lot of his thoughts as well. I think it starts off a bit slow when it comes to things happening, but it makes sense. But things absolutely do happen in this book. But it's all centered around the theme of birthdays and about Greg's birthday. And so the author has mentioned this in interviews. Basically, Greg thinks that his family is planning a surprise party for him because they haven't really mentioned anything about his birthday, which has been coming up. His mom has been working on getting ready for a pie competition at their church, which is on the same day as his birthday, and he thinks that that's just a cover-up for his birthday, but it's not. She got caught up in that, and his family forgot his birthday. Word spreads and Greg's mom gets shamed for this. I remember seeing an interview around the time the book was announced. The author said that his mom gets Facebook shamed. Facebook isn't explicitly mentioned, but it is basically on social media, and I did like the social media aspect of that. I saw a Goodreads reviewer say it was Reddit. It looked like that. I mean, there were dislikes, which Facebook doesn't have, but it was basically some social media. And so, yeah, his mom is embarrassed, and she wants to make it up to him and also save her reputation by giving him an actual party. So a lot of this book is about Greg planning his actual birthday party and about what he wants. Now, what he wants is a certain trading card that was a misprint that there's only one of. The trading cards are called micro creatures, which are basically Pokemon, and that's another thing I like about these books. I like the pop culture references and recognizing what they're supposed to be. So Greg does talk about micro creatures, and there's a bit where he even talks about basically their version of Pokemon Go, which was 9 years ago at this point, but I think it's fun that they included that. So there was this misprinted card, and it's worth a lot of money, so Greg wants to find it so that he can turn it into the comic store and get a lot of money. And that's basically the plot of this book. So he tries to figure out ways that he can set up his birthday party so that he has a higher chance of getting that card. So this book I thought was okay. I mean, I enjoyed reading it. It never really felt super boring because there are illustrations on every page and it's pretty easy to follow along with. So I was invested, which is a good thing. That's one of the positive things I have to say about this, and I'll tell you the others later. So I basically enjoyed reading it while I was reading it, but overall, after reading the whole thing, I give it 3 out of 5 stars. I have definitely enjoyed other Wimpy Kid books more. Now, for me, when it comes to media, I think there's definitely a difference between experiencing something and finding it boring versus aggravating. At least if it's aggravating, you're feeling something, compared to when it's boring, it's just boring. So I definitely didn't find this boring, and it wasn't super aggravating to me, but just a little bit, because Greg is not a very likable character, and I think people, especially people who grew up with the series, realize that more later on, that like he's not a very good friend. He is, and I've got a whole slew of adjectives for you about him. I think he is quite selfish, self-centered, materialistic, and kind of lazy. I will say he is creative when it comes to whenever he wants something, like all the ways he tries to capitalize on his birthday party. He is creative when it comes to trying to get something that he wants, so it was interesting to see all the ways he was innovative with that. And you could also say, well, he's 12, but I think that he's not a very good example, but I do think that he can be relatable in a lot of ways. And I think this author is still doing a great job at writing things that are relatable to kids, plots, wants, complaints, and like I said, a lot of the books are Greg's thoughts. I think that those can be very relatable, like how he feels about interacting with distant relatives on his birthday and things like that. I think that kids can definitely relate. I think he was even more selfish in this book than some of the past others. Like some of the more recent ones I've even given as many as 5 stars, and then some of them 4. I don't have ratings for all the books. I've really only rated the ones I've read since starting last year, so it's only the last few up until this one. I think with the 19th book, Hot Mess, he was doing pretty well. And near the end, there was like one thing that was kind of selfish. It wasn't too bad. Not like this. Like Greg in this book is just, and I know it maybe isn't supposed to be that serious, and I'll touch on that, but even though I'm grateful that this series has helped so many kids get into reading, which I'll touch on that later as well, I'm still going to give my honest thoughts about the book and the content of it, because the fact is that these are books that children are reading and it can influence them, and I think it's good to be creative and try different things. But like in this book, I think that Greg's selfishness is just out of control. And I think that he'd be a good businessman. Not an ethical one, but the kind that just charges you for like everything unnecessarily and just absolutely scams you. Like that is the kind of businessman he would be. Particularly when it comes to his plans for his birthday party and how he decides everything, like charging people for basic things like having regular toilet paper and then premium toilet paper that he charges people extra for. Charging people, I think it was like 25 cents to use a bounce house, and so many other things. And even when it came to who he invited, he was only thinking about himself and how that would benefit him and how that would increase his chances of getting that rare card. He doesn't care at all about spending time with his family or friends. He just thinks about how his birthday party can benefit himself. And I get that it's his party and the presents would be for him, but there were some things that just kind of disgusted me. Not like genuinely upset me, but just, I was like, that's kind of gross. So yeah, I know it's probably not that serious, so I'm not like really mad about it, and I still enjoyed reading this overall. It's a fun series, but it has its flaws. Greg definitely has his flaws, and I know a lot of people recognize that. I do understand his motive. I absolutely understand it. And I like that early on he touches on collectibles and how those work. As someone who's been in that kind of community, I could relate to that and found it a bit humorous. But even if I understand somebody's motive, that doesn't mean I have to agree with them or let it slide. As I said, I do have some positive things to say about this book, one of which is that I was genuinely invested. I was interested in the plot of how his birthday would go and if he would get the card or not, and it was just invested in the overall thing. So I was interested, which is always good. You know, sometimes you may read a book and you don't really care what happens in it, you don't care what happens to the characters, and I didn't feel that way with this one, so that was good at least. There's even a little bit of clever foreshadowing that I didn't see, because these books I don't think too deep into it sometimes. As I said, Greg is not a very likable main character. Like, yeah, he's the character we've been following for so long, but he's definitely not a character that I would say I love. Sadly, in this book specifically, I don't think that there are many other great characters, if any. Rowley is decent, but he's sadly not in this book very much, and when he is in it, it's only because Greg is talking about him and judging him or using him in his schemes. I felt like there wasn't really any good, strong connection with Greg and anybody in his family or any of his friends or anyone, which is something I like to see in a book. I really care about characters and their relationships with each other. Like, Greg knows people and he has people he talks to and hangs out with, like he talks about previous birthday parties, but his friends are basically just mentioned like first name, last name, and he doesn't really say much about them. Why he doesn't just talk about Rowley, who we've known since the first book, who there used to be more of an emphasis on, I don't know. But yeah, we don't know very much about his friends, so they are basically just names and faces. We don't know much about them. And I highly doubt he cares much about them anyway. I don't know why certain characters aren't being showcased as much in this book. There was a bit of fragment. I think it might have been a while since he's been in the books. At least I know for a while he wasn't in them. But he was in this one, but briefly. So that was nice. But there are like classic characters that we have not seen in a long time for whatever reason. Especially like the characters that were in the movies. I feel like those are the ones that people know the best and would want to see. Why they're not in the books anymore, I don't know. There never has been much depth or character development in these books, which I guess is kind of the point. Maybe there are some lessons sometimes, and I get it, not everything has to be super serious. Not every author wants to put lessons or messages in their books. Some just want kids to have fun reading. And I remember seeing the author say something about the Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, something about they're books that he hopes can get kids into reading, but they're not the books he hopes they're reading later on. Like, he wants them to go on and read other books as well. And like I said, I am thankful that this series has helped so many kids get into reading. Like, that's a great thing. That should definitely be encouraged. So I'm really thankful to the series for that, and I absolutely recognize its impact and its significance. I understand that maybe some books are just meant to be fun, but with that being said, Greg still isn't a great influence. Greg blames other people for things that are totally his fault. Like, there are two examples of this when it comes to the birthday party. One, as I mentioned, he wants to charge extra for premium toilet paper in his house's bathroom. Well, he forgets to ask his mom to get better toilet paper, so he just gets his brother's body spray and sprays it on the toilet paper, just so that it would smell better and people would actually think it was premium toilet paper, when in fact it was the same as the other toilet paper, but now it's got spray on it. Well, this guy uses the toilet paper and gets a rash as a result. And Greg says, I feel like he only had himself to blame though. The way I see it, you shouldn't go number 2 at a kid's birthday party, because that's the kind of thing you should take care of at home. Is this meant to be funny? Because, like, that's ridiculous. Like, you literally wanted people to use the toilet paper so that you could get paid. And yeah, people should be able to use the bathroom at a birthday party, even if it's at somebody else's house, especially when you've got the extra toilet paper set up for them. So there he goes, not taking responsibility, and then naturally he just runs away to another area of the party to completely avoid responsibility. The other example of that is another thing that goes wrong at the birthday party, which is basically everything, but you get the point. For some reason, in the process of getting the cake says hazelnut allergy. And so Greg's mom is like, well, I have to fix that. But honestly, like, what's so bad about the cake saying hazelnut allergy? Like, I would be fine with that. Like, yeah, it's not what you wanted it to say, but if you just wanted it to say happy birthday, Greg, then, I mean, that's kind of basic, and I'm sure he'll have plenty of other birthdays that keep having that cake, and people already know whose birthday it is, so I think this would have been funny, now that I'm thinking about it. But anyway, she tries to fix it. Keyword tries. So she actually does manage to make it look pretty good. According to Greg, she covered up the strawberry frosting with mayonnaise that she dyed with red food coloring. Then she wrote a new inscription using chocolate syrup. But she says that the cake is only for pictures and that nobody should actually eat it, which is just not very smart on his mom's part. Like, Greg isn't the only problem. Like, his family are a bunch of problems too, honestly. Like, why do you have the cake if it's only for pictures? Nobody's going to listen to that, and that's pointless, and it's disappointing. Like, it's false advertising. Nobody should eat it because the mayonnaise had expired. So not only should people not eat it, but it could actually be a health hazard for people to eat it. Like, at this point, you are just putting your party guests in danger. Speaking of the party guests being in danger, I just wanted to say that I do find this illustration pretty funny. But back to the cake, this whole part of the book was just a whole disaster. Anyway, not so smart decisions aside, once the party ends and people start to leave, some people have some of the cake, because of course they do. The cake is out there in the open, and nobody made an announcement about anything. And Greg says, and if they got sick from the expired mayonnaise, I feel like that was on them. How is that on them? They didn't know it was expired mayonnaise. They didn't make the cake. They didn't know what was in the cake. That's on you and your family. There he goes, blaming other people again. And also just not caring at all. But of course he doesn't. I don't know who any of these characters are. I couldn't name any of them for you. These are all people he invited for his own personal gain. And there were also people from a wedding who came over and crashed the party. But yeah, he didn't care about anybody at this party. At the end, the party pretty much just becomes chaos and things don't really go as Greg planned. And he says that the party was a disaster. But why was it a disaster? Because he didn't get what he wanted. However, I don't think that Greg is too young to learn anything. Now, I understand if someone, especially a kid, thinks about an upcoming birthday or holiday, and the main thing on their mind is presents that they may get. I understand that that's exciting, but like I said, there's just, when it comes to the party, no focus on him hanging out with his friends or having a good time with them, which I think is something you would want in a party. Like, he'd be happy to see people. He was happy to see people, but only because that meant that he had a higher chance of getting that trading card. So there was no focus on that, which I just thought was sad for him. Like, even if he does end up rich or whatever, like he wants, he could be lonely. Just because of the nature of these books and the way they've been going for nearly 20 years now, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not really any character development. I think the series could still go on even if he did have that. I think that would be a good thing to have. Like, keep him in middle school forever if you want. That doesn't mean he can't learn things. Anyway, at the end, after the party's a disaster, Greg opens a note from his aunt from Hawaii who came to his party, who he invited only because she's a lawyer and makes a lot of money. See, every decision he made was out of pure selfishness. Anyway, she stayed at his house, and she stayed in his room, and she left a note for him, and in the note there was the card he was looking for. He holds on to it for a while though, because he doesn't want his family to mess it up, and he also doesn't want to get like media attention and then have everyone he knows ask him for money and things like that. So he was smart with that in a way. Anyway, what ends up happening, and I figured it would end up being something frustrating and ironic, and I personally don't really like ironic endings. But anyway, the company decides to make a bunch of packs of those cards where the creature has 3 eyes instead of 2, which is what the misprint was. Naturally though, of course, that doesn't really make sense on the company's part, and nobody wants the cards because nobody wanted them because the creature had 3 eyes. People wanted them because there was one rare one. Like, there's a whole group of guys who hunt for the card, so that was kind of interesting how dedicated those people were, because I feel like there are people like that in real life. So Greg does not end up rich, and he kind of just stops caring about the card.
So does Greg learn anything by the end? Well, I guess a little, but not very much. So what ends up happening is news of his crazy party spreads, and other people hire him because they want to have a party that was just like his. So he's able to make some money out of that, make a little business, and the last paragraph says, who knows, if this thing gets big enough, maybe we can take it nationwide. And even though this wasn't exactly what I was wishing for, sometimes you just gotta roll with it. Which honestly does sound like kind of a good lesson. Like, yeah, sometimes what happens, and I'd say oftentimes what happens isn't what you expect or what you wanted, but it can still be good. Good can still come out of it, absolutely. I think that's a good message. But it is like the very last page, the very last sentence, and I feel like there wasn't much time for reflection, and I think that Greg could still use a lot of work. But still, I appreciate the author's creativity, and there are a lot of fun things in this.
So yeah, the ending was kind of mid. There's also not much diversity or representation in these books, but then again, I don't have super high expectation for these books. That's just something I wrote down in my notes. I also wrote down in my notes that I don't have very high expectations for these. I'm just trying to say what these books do and don't have. I thought that this particular book in the series was not great, but it was still entertaining. It was still fun to read, and it was still a light, easy read. I'm just giving my honest thoughts on it, and I thought that other books in the series were better than this one. I will say that this cover is one of my favorite Wimpy Kid covers for sure. I love this cover. It's really pretty. We finally got a pink cover. I love the cake theme. I did see someone point out though that it doesn't even look like a diary anymore. It's just cake, which is true. Like, even if you run out of ideas, it doesn't make much sense. And I saw another commenter somewhere say that that's just what the diary looked like when Greg's mom bought it, which we'll go with that, sure, why not? But it is very pretty, and I do really love the pink and brown cake theme. But the cover for me is only a very small part of the book. I care about what's inside the book itself. So yeah, I definitely disagreed with some things in this book, but I'm not too surprised by it. It's not out of character for Greg at all. I was still happy to get this and read this. It was still a fun experience, and it's fun to read something I've known for so long, and to still be a part of that community, I guess, and to read the newest installment. So that was fun. If you've read this book, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it and how you think this compares to the other books, especially the recent ones.